You watch them get promoted while you get passed over. You see them praised for ideas you first suggested months ago. You notice how they smile and nod during meetings, then whisper different truths in private corridors. Meanwhile, you continue speaking your mind, offering unfiltered feedback, believing that honesty will eventually be rewarded. But the pattern repeats. The person who tells comfortable lies rises, while the person who tells uncomfortable truths remains exactly where they started. The most honest people often become the most overlooked people. They watch manipulators and strategic communicators claim rewards that should belong to those with integrity. What these truth-tellers fail to understand is that they've fallen into a trap as old as civilization itself. Niccolo Machiavelli identified this pattern 5 centuries ago as a fundamental law of human nature. Those who insist on radical honesty in a world built on careful illusions get eliminated from the game entirely. The Martyr's Delusion. The honest person believes they're performing a noble service by speaking truth to power. They imagine themselves as brave truth-tellers in a world of cowards and liars. Every workplace has this person who interrupts meetings to point out flawed logic, corrects superiors publicly, and refuses to participate in corporate theater. These individuals have confused honesty with identity. They've made truth-telling central to their self-concept, which means any compromise feels like self-betrayal. But this rigid identification with honesty becomes a prison that limits their effectiveness and influence. Machiavelli observed that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. People don't reward you for being right. They reward you for making them feel comfortable with being wrong. The person who constantly corrects others creates cognitive dissonance, and humans will eliminate the source of dissonance before they'll change their beliefs. When someone points out inconvenient realities, the listener experiences internal conflict between their existing beliefs and new information. Rather than undergo the painful process of updating their worldview, they dismiss the messenger. The honest person becomes associated with discomfort, while the strategic communicator becomes associated with validation. The most successful people understand that truth is a tool, not a religion. They wield it strategically, timing their revelations for maximum impact and minimum backlash. They know that creating change matters more than being right. Machiavelli's mirror of human nature. Machiavelli's genius lay in accurately describing how power actually functions. He wrote, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." The honest person operates from the assumption that people want truth. Machiavelli recognized that people want comfort disguised as truth. Watch how successful people navigate difficult conversations. They construct narratives that allow others to reach uncomfortable conclusions gradually. They plant seeds of doubt rather than delivering harsh verdicts. They understand that people can only handle as much truth as their ego can absorb without fracturing. Such an approach requires psychological sophistication rather than manipulation. The person who dumps uncomfortable truths on others without regard for their emotional state practices cruelty. True honesty requires understanding how truth can be received and processed, not just delivered. The strategic communicator understands that perception shapes reality more powerfully than facts. They invest as much energy in managing perceptions as they do in being factually correct. The difference lies in understanding that how you tell the truth matters as much as what truth you tell. The architecture of acceptable lies. Every functional society operates on layers of mutually agreed upon fictions. We pretend that hierarchy is based on merit, that fairness governs most decisions, and that people generally act from noble motives. These social lubricants allow complex human systems to function without constant friction. The honest person sees these social fictions as hypocrisy and feels compelled to expose them. They point out that the promotion went to the boss's favorite, not the most qualified candidate. They mention that the company's diversity initiative is mostly performance theater. All of these observations might be factually correct, but they violate the social contract that allows organizations to maintain morale and cohesion. Successful people understand how to navigate this landscape of acceptable fictions. They know which truths can be spoken directly, which must be implied, and which should never be mentioned at all. They've learned to distinguish between lies that harm and lies that heal. Consider the dinner party where someone asks how you liked their terrible cooking. The honest person says it was awful and explains exactly what went wrong. The strategic person says it was interesting and asks about the recipe. Both responses convey information, but only one preserves the relationship and the host's dignity. The approach demonstrates sophisticated emotional intelligence rather than deception. It recognizes that humans have fragile egos, complex motivations, and limited capacity for processing uncomfortable realities. Working within these constraints demonstrates sophistication rather than dishonesty, the truth-teller's graveyard. History provides countless examples of people destroyed by their commitment to uncomfortable honesty. Galileo spent his final years under house arrest for insisting on heliocentrism. Whistleblowers routinely face career destruction, legal harassment, and social isolation. Even when they're eventually vindicated, the personal cost often exceeds any benefit they've created. The pattern repeats on smaller scales throughout corporate and social environments. The employee who exposes corruption gets fired, while the corrupt executives receive golden parachutes. The friend who points out relationship red flags gets excluded from the social circle. These outcomes represent predictable consequences of challenging systems that people have invested in maintaining. When someone's income, identity, or emotional stability depends on believing certain things, they'll eliminate threats to those beliefs before changing their minds. Consider the difference between successful and failed truth-tellers. Successful ones understand timing, allies, and strategic communication. They build coalitions, gather overwhelming evidence, and frame their revelations in ways that make change easier than maintaining the status quo. Failed truth-tellers typically operate alone, deliver their message without regard for timing or context, and assume that being right is sufficient for creating change. The most tragic aspect involves people who could have achieved their goals through strategic communication. Their commitment to radical honesty became an obstacle to the very changes they wanted to create. The art of strategic revelation. Strategic honesty begins with understanding your actual goal. The person focused on their own moral purity will approach communication differently than the person focused on results. The most effective truth-tellers operate like skilled surgeons who know exactly where to cut, how deep to go, and when the patient can handle the procedure. Master the art of graduated revelation. Start with smaller truths that people can easily accept, then gradually introduce more challenging realities as trust and understanding develop. The person who dumps everything at once overwhelms their audience's capacity for processing uncomfortable information. Build your influence account before making large withdrawals. The person who consistently provides value, demonstrates competence, and shows genuine care for others' well-being can deliver difficult messages that would destroy someone with less relational capital. Frame difficult truths in ways that serve your audience's legitimate interests. Instead of pointing out how someone is wrong, show them how adopting a different perspective will help them achieve their goals. Transform truth-telling from an attack on their current position into an opportunity for improvement and growth.